Chapter 1: The rule Diego was never meant to break. The modern world liked to pretend it had evolved past instincts. Glass buildings reached toward the sky, cities pulsed with technology, and laws wrapped society in the illusion of order. But beneath all of it, biology still ruled. No matter how advanced humanity became, the hierarchy remained quietly intact. Alphas led. Betas adapted. Omegas were protected and restricted. The rules surrounding omegas were written with careful words like safety, structure, and balance. But everyone knew what they really meant: distance, control, limitation. Diego Rivera had built his entire career by respecting those boundaries. At 27, he was one of the youngest alpha directors in the city's largest media corporation. His rise hadn't been easy, but it had been precise. He was known for discipline, fairness, and an iron grip on his instincts. Other alphas respected him. Betas trusted him. Omegas rarely worked directly under him, and that had always been intentional. Diego preferred it that way. His office sat on the top floor, all clean lines and muted colors. The windows overlooked the city, endless movement below reminding him that momentum was everything. Control was everything. So when human resources notified him of a new assistant transfer, he barely glanced at the file, until he saw the designation. Omega. Diego's jaw tightened. Transfers happened. Policies changed. He understood that. Still, a flicker of unease settled in his chest as he straightened the stack of folders on his desk, preparing himself before the knock came. 3 short taps echoed through the office. "Come in," Diego said evenly. The door opened. Austin Lee stepped inside. He didn't rush, didn't hesitate. He moved with quiet confidence, posture straight but not stiff, hands clasped neatly in front of him. His appearance was unassuming: soft brown hair neatly styled, clean-cut clothes, calm expression. But something about him immediately drew attention. Diego noticed it before he could stop himself. The scent. It wasn't strong. It wasn't invasive. It lingered lightly in the air, warm and subtle, like sunlight filtered through curtains. Pleasant, controlled, dangerous. Diego inhaled slowly, grounding himself. His alpha instincts stirred, alert and curious, testing the unfamiliar presence in his space. He forced them down, locking them away behind years of discipline. Austin met his gaze briefly, then lowered his eyes respectfully. "Good morning, sir. I'm Austin Lee. I've been assigned as your new executive assistant." His voice was steady, polite, no nervous tremor. That alone surprised Diego. "Have a seat," Diego said, gesturing toward the chair across his desk. Austin obeyed, movements smooth and careful, as if he'd learned long ago how to take up as little space as possible without seeming small. Diego skimmed the file as Austin waited. Strong performance reviews. Efficient. Observant. No disciplinary notes. Too perfect. "Do you have experience working under an alpha director?" Diego asked, keeping his tone neutral. "Yes, sir," Austin replied. "My previous supervisor was also an alpha." Diego glanced up. "And you had no issues?" Austin hesitated for half a second, barely noticeable. "No, sir," he said. "I maintain professionalism at all times." Diego studied him more closely now. Omegas were often taught how to speak like that. Careful phrasing, safe answers, survival instincts shaped into courtesy. Something about it unsettled him. "You'll find the workload demanding," Diego said. "Long hours, high expectations." "I'm prepared," Austin said simply. Diego nodded. "Good. You can start today." The meeting should have ended there. But as Austin stood, his sleeve brushed the edge of Diego's desk. The scent shifted just slightly. Diego's breath caught before he could stop it. Austin froze, eyes flicking up, clearly aware something had changed. Diego straightened instantly, stepping back from the desk. "You may go," he said, sharper than intended. Austin blinked, startled, then bowed his head. "Yes, sir." He left quietly, closing the door behind him. The office felt too still afterward. Diego exhaled slowly, pressing his fingers against the glass window as he stared out at the city. His heartbeat hadn't fully settled yet, irritation and something far more dangerous coiling beneath his ribs. That reaction had been unacceptable. He had allowed instinct to surface even for a moment. An alpha in his position could not afford that kind of weakness. Not with an Omega under his authority. Not in a world that watched every move alphas made. Diego clenched his jaw. This was temporary, professional, controlled. Austin Lee was just another assistant. And Diego Rivera would not break the rule that had protected him his entire life. No matter how warm that lingering scent still felt in the air. Chapter 2: Too Close for Comfort. Austin learned early in life that survival for an Omega depended on awareness. Awareness of tone. Awareness of posture. Awareness of when to speak and when to disappear. That instinct followed him into Diego Rivera's office on his first full day. The executive floor was quieter than the rest of the building. Footsteps muffled by thick carpet. Voices subdued behind glass walls. Austin arrived early, as he always did, organizing schedules and sorting digital files before anyone else arrived. It was easier to exist before the world demanded attention. Diego arrived precisely at 8. Austin felt it before he saw him. The air shifted cooler, heavier. An alpha presence that didn't overwhelm but commanded space simply by existing. Austin straightened reflexively, smoothing his sleeves as Diego passed by. "Good morning," Diego said, stopping beside Austin's desk. "Good morning, sir," Austin replied. Their eyes met briefly. Something flickered there, recognition maybe, or caution. Diego nodded and continued into his office without another word. Austin released a breath he hadn't realized he was holding. Working under Diego quickly became an exercise in restraint. The Alpha Director ran his department with quiet efficiency. Meetings were crisp, expectations clear, feedback precise. Diego never raised his voice, never used intimidation. He didn't need to. His authority was absolute without being cruel. And he was careful. Austin noticed it in the way Diego kept physical distance, always across a desk, never standing directly behind him. Noticed how Diego handed documents without letting their fingers brush. How he would subtly shift when Austin leaned too close while explaining something. First, Austin thought it was dislike. But dislike usually came with sharp words or dismissive glances. Diego offered neither. Instead, there was tension. It followed them through every interaction. Invisible but undeniable. When Diego asked Austin to stay late to help prepare a report, the air felt heavier. When Austin leaned over Diego's desk to point out an error, Diego's shoulders stiffened slightly before he thanked him. Sometimes Austin caught Diego watching him only for a second before looking away. It unsettled him more than outright hostility ever could. By the end of the week, Austin had learned Diego's habits. The way he reviewed emails twice. The way he paused before making decisions, weighing consequences carefully. The faint furrow in his brow when something concerned him. Austin respected him. That made everything harder. Late Friday evening, the office was nearly empty again. The city lights outside flickered like stars trapped behind glass. Austin sat at his desk reviewing Diego's calendar when he felt it. That subtle pull in his chest, warmth spreading beneath his skin. He stiffened. His suppressants were thinning. He hadn't expected it so soon. Austin breathed slowly, forcing his body to calm. The scent hadn't surfaced yet. At least he hoped it hadn't. He quietly stood, intending to excuse himself early. That was when Diego stepped out of his office. "Austin." Austin turned too quickly. "Yes, sir?" Diego held a tablet, eyes scanning the screen. "I need you to cross-check the budget revisions before morning." "Of course," Austin said, though his pulse had already begun to race. Diego approached the desk, standing across from him. Too close. Much too close. Austin could feel the warmth of his own scent pressing against his control. Panic fluttered in his chest, sharp and immediate. Diego froze mid-step. His jaw tightened. His eyes darkened for a fraction of a second. Austin saw it, and felt a flush of shame rush through him. "I'm sorry," Austin said quickly. I can finish this from home if... No, Diego said, a little too fast. He took a step back, clearly restraining himself. When he spoke again, his voice was lower, steadier. Take the files, Diego said. Finish them remotely. You're dismissed for the night. Austin hesitated. Sir, I can still. That's an order. Austin nodded immediately. Yes, sir. He gathered his things with trembling hands, avoiding eye contact as he left. He didn't miss the way Diego turned toward the window the moment the door closed. The ride home was quiet, his thoughts loud. He hadn't meant for this to happen. Back in his apartment, Austin sank onto the couch, pressing his hands over his face. Working under an alpha always came with risk, but Diego wasn't like the others. He wasn't careless or demanding or cruel. That scared Austin more than anything. Back at the office, Diego stood motionless. The lingering warmth in the air made his chest ache. His instincts pressed against his control, demanding attention, urging him to acknowledge what he already knew. This arrangement was dangerous. Not because Austin lacked discipline, but because Diego was losing his. He exhaled slowly, grounding himself again. This would not continue. He would maintain distance. He would enforce boundaries. He would not allow instinct to dictate his actions. But as he shut down the lights and left the office, Diego couldn't shake the truth settling heavily in his chest. Working this close to Austin wasn't just uncomfortable. It was tempting. And temptation was the first step toward breaking rules that could never be undone. Chapter 3: The night control slipped. Diego prided himself on awareness. It was what separated capable alphas from reckless ones. Knowing where you stood, how much space you occupied, and what your presence did to others. For years, he had mastered that balance. His instincts were sharp, but his restraint was sharper. Until Austin Lee. The following week tested every limit Diego had placed on himself. He adjusted schedules so their interactions were minimal. Communicated through messages when possible. Structured meetings so others were always present. It wasn't avoidance, it was management. At least that's what he told himself. Austin noticed the shift immediately. He said nothing. That somehow made it worse. Austin performed his duties flawlessly, never complaining, never questioning Diego's sudden distance. He kept his head down, voice calm, scent carefully contained. To anyone else, it would have looked like professionalism. To Diego, it felt like punishment. Late Thursday evening, a system failure hit the department without warning. Files locked, deadlines looming. Panic spread through internal messages as employees were called back into the office. By the time Diego arrived, exhaustion clung to him like a second skin. Austin was already there. He stood beside his desk, sleeves rolled up slightly, fingers moving quickly over the keyboard as he coordinated with IT. His focus was absolute, expression calm despite the chaos around them. Diego stopped short. Austin's scent was different, subtle but warmer than usual. Diego forced himself to move, voice steady as he addressed the team. Hours passed in tense concentration. One by one, employees left as the issue was resolved, until only Diego and Austin remained. Again, the clock ticked past midnight. Austin leaned back slightly, rubbing his temples. The core files are stable now. I'll finish cross-checking the rest. Diego nodded. You should go home. I can handle the rest. Austin hesitated. Sir, I'm fine. I don't mind staying. That was when Diego smelled it fully. The air shifted, sweet, rich, unmistakable. Heat adjacent. Diego's breath stuttered. His instincts surged hard and fast, every alpha sense snapping to attention. Protect. Claim. Anchor. The urge pressed against his control like a rising tide. Diego turned away sharply, gripping the edge of the desk. Austin, he said, voice rougher than he intended. You need to leave. Now. Austin froze. He inhaled, realization flashing across his face. His cheeks flushed, eyes widening slightly. I'm sorry, Austin said quickly. My suppressants must have. Stop. Diego cut in, holding up a hand without turning back. You've done nothing wrong. The words tasted bitter. Diego straightened, forcing his breathing to slow. When he turned to face Austin again, he kept his distance. "Go home," Diego repeated more gently. "I'll file the report myself." Austin gathered his bag with shaking hands, embarrassment written across his features. He paused at the door, fingers tightening around the handle. "Thank you," he said quietly. Diego nodded once. The door closed. Silence crashed down around him. Diego exhaled sharply, pacing the office as the lingering scent clung to the air, impossible to ignore. His control felt fragile, stretched thin in a way it hadn't been in years. He pressed his palm against the window, grounding himself as the city lights blurred below. This was unacceptable. He was an alpha in a position of authority. Austin was an omega under his care. There was no version of this situation that ended without damage. Diego stayed late, scrubbing the office of any trace of Austin's presence before leaving. At home, Austin sat on the edge of his bed, suppressants laid out on the nightstand, hands clenched in his lap. He hadn't meant for it to happen, hadn't wanted to be seen that way. Diego's words echoed in his head. Not accusing, not angry, protective. That was worse, because it made Austin want something he'd sworn never to hope for. Back in his quiet apartment, Diego lay awake long after midnight, staring at the ceiling. His instincts refused to settle. He had smelled Austin at his most vulnerable and chosen restraint. But the truth gnawed at him relentlessly. Next time, his control might not be enough. And that terrified him more than any consequence ever could. Chapter 4: Distance that Cuts Deeper. Monday arrived with the kind of quiet that felt deliberate. Diego noticed it the moment he stepped onto the executive floor. Conversations dropped. Glances shifted away too quickly. News traveled fast in corporate spaces, especially when an alpha director abruptly changed his routines. Diego had done it intentionally. No late nights, no private meetings, no unnecessary proximity. Austin would be protected by distance, even if that distance hurt. Austin felt it immediately. The schedule Diego sent that morning was precise to the minute, packed with meetings that placed others between them at all times. Messages came through formal channels only. When Austin delivered documents, Diego accepted them without comment, eyes already back on his screen. It was efficient. It was professional. Felt like a quiet rejection. Austin reminded himself that this was normal. This was how Omegas survived, by accepting space without questioning the reason behind it. Still, his chest tightened every time Diego dismissed him with a nod instead of a word. By midweek, the strain was impossible to ignore. During a senior staff meeting, Austin presented analytics he'd worked on for days. His voice stayed steady as he spoke, but his hands trembled slightly as he passed out printed copies. A senior alpha executive leaned back in his chair, lips curling into an amused smile. "Interesting data," he said, "though I'm not sure an Omega should be handling strategic projections. Isn't that a bit ambitious?" The room went silent. Austin froze, heat rushing to his face. He'd heard comments like that before. Sharp, dismissive, meant to remind him of his place. Diego stood. The movement was calm, but it cut through the room like a blade. "That's enough," Diego said evenly. The executive blinked, clearly unprepared. You were being inappropriate," Diego continued, voice cold. "Austin's work meets our standards. Questioning his designation instead of his data is unprofessional." No one spoke. Diego's gaze swept the room. "If anyone else has concerns, address them through proper channels. Otherwise, this meeting will continue." Austin stared at the table, heart pounding. No alpha had ever defended him like that. After the meeting, Austin retreated to his desk, hands shaking. Gratitude and confusion twisted together painfully. Diego didn't approach him. The rest of the day passed in silence. That evening, Austin finally spoke up. "Sir," he said quietly as Diego passed by. "May I ask you something?" Diego stopped but didn't turn around. "Make it brief. Did I do something wrong?" The words came out softer than Austin intended. Diego closed his eyes. "No, he said firmly. He turned then, meeting Austin's gaze fully for the first time in days. You did everything right. Austin searched his expression. Then why are you? Because distance is necessary, Diego interrupted gently. And because I won't allow anyone to use your designation against you, including myself. The honesty stunned Austin into silence. Diego nodded once and walked away. That night, both of them lay awake in separate apartments, the same thought pressing heavily on their minds. This distance wasn't solving anything. It was only making the ache sharper. And deep down, they both knew that restraint, when stretched too far, eventually snapped. Chapter 5: Wanting what was never allowed. Desire was not supposed to be loud. Diego had always believed it arrived quietly, manageable, logical, something that could be acknowledged and dismissed. He had lived his life that way, making choices based on reason rather than impulse. But what he felt now was neither quiet nor manageable. It followed him everywhere. He noticed it in the way his attention lingered on Austin's desk when it was empty, in the soft sound of Austin's voice when he answered calls, in the faint warmth that clung to the air long after Austin left the room. Diego told himself it was responsibility. That heightened awareness came with leadership. That protecting an Omega under his authority was simply part of the job. He knew better. The dreams made that impossible to ignore. They came without warning, soft, disarming things. Austin laughing freely. Austin leaning close without fear. Austin's scent deepening as trust replaced restraint. Diego would wake with his heart racing, control already slipping through his fingers. He hated himself for it. At work, Diego doubled down on discipline. He stayed late only when others were present. Delegated tasks he would normally give Austin to other staff. Kept his tone clipped and neutral. Austin noticed everything. He always did. The distance hurt more than he wanted to admit. Not because he expected affection, but because Diego's restraint felt heavy with meaning. As if something important was being held back, locked away where neither of them could reach it. One evening, after a particularly long day, Austin lingered near Diego's office door. "Sir," he said softly. Diego looked up, tension tightening his shoulders. "What is it?" Austin hesitated, then straightened. "Do I make you uncomfortable?" The question landed between them like glass. Diego stood slowly, closing the distance only enough to speak without being overheard. "Yes," he said honestly. "And no." Austin's breath caught. "You challenge my control," Diego continued, voice low and steady. "And that is not something I take lightly. I never meant to." "I know," Diego interrupted gently. "This isn't your fault." Silence stretched, heavy and fragile. "I won't cross that line," Diego said finally. "No matter what I feel." Austin nodded, throat tight. "I understand." But understanding didn't make it hurt less. That night, Austin sat on his couch staring at the city lights, wondering when wanting something had become such a dangerous act. Across the city, Diego poured himself a glass of water he didn't drink, staring at his reflection in the darkened window. He could have transferred Austin, could have requested reassignment, could have protected them both. But the thought of losing Austin entirely made his chest ache. That was when Diego realized the truth he had been avoiding. This wasn't just desire. It was attachment. And attachments, especially forbidden ones, were far harder to break. Chapter 6: When the Body Betrays You. Austin had always trusted routine. Suppressants at the same time every day. Meals scheduled. Sleep carefully measured. Control for an Omega wasn't optional, it was survival. He had never missed a dose before. But stress had a way of unraveling even the most careful habits. The night it happened, Austin barely noticed the warning signs. His head ached. His limbs felt heavy. He blamed exhaustion and stayed late, determined to finish the reports Diego needed before morning. The office was quiet, lights dimmed automatically after hours. The city outside glowed softly, distant and indifferent. It wasn't until warmth bloomed under his skin that panic set in. No. Austin pressed his fingers to his wrist, heart racing. His suppressants had worn thinner than expected. his body responding to weeks of tension, unspoken longing, and stress he hadn't allowed himself to acknowledge. He tried to steady his breathing. Then Diego walked in. The reaction was immediate. The air shifted, charged and heavy, as Diego froze mid-step. His alpha instincts surged before he could stop them, every sense locking onto Austin's presence. Austin saw the change instantly. "I'm sorry," Austin said quickly, standing too fast. "I didn't realize. I can leave." Diego moved without thinking, stopping a safe distance away. "Sit down," he said, voice firm but controlled. Austin obeyed, trembling. Diego pulled off his jacket slowly, carefully, as if every movement required restraint. He draped it over Austin's shoulders without letting their skin touch. "Breathe," Diego said quietly. "You're not alone." Austin clutched the fabric, Diego's scent grounding him even as emotion threatened to overwhelm him. No alpha had ever been this careful with him before. Diego didn't touch him again. Instead, he called HR, arranged emergency leave, and canceled meetings without explanation. He drove Austin home in silence, windows cracked, hands gripping the steering wheel like an anchor. At Austin's apartment, Diego stopped at the door. "I'll stay nearby," he said, "just in case." Austin nodded, voice barely above a whisper. "Thank you for not leaving." Diego closed his eyes. He stayed in his car until dawn. When Austin finally slept, safe and steady, Diego rested his forehead against the steering wheel. This wasn't just about control anymore. It was about choice. And Diego was running out of ways to pretend he wasn't already choosing Austin. Chapter 7: The Price of Wanting. Monday didn't bring relief. It brought whispers. Austin felt them first, side glances in the hallway, voices lowering when he approached, a sudden politeness that felt sharp around the edges. Omegas learned to read rooms quickly, and this one was restless. Something had changed. Diego noticed too. A closed-door meeting appeared on his calendar without explanation. HR representatives. 2 senior alpha executives. No agenda listed. He already knew what it was about. The room smelled faintly of authority when Diego entered. Concern masked as professionalism. Questions framed as courtesy. "You've been very accommodating lately," one executive said lightly. "Too accommodating," another added. Diego folded his hands calmly. "My priority is performance. Your assistant's designation complicates that," HR said carefully. "We've received concerns." Diego's jaw tightened. "From whom?" "That's not relevant," the executive replied. "What matters is perception. An alpha in your position must avoid attachments." The word hung heavy in the air. "I haven't crossed any boundaries," Diego said. "No," the executive agreed. "But you're close." The warning was clear. Step back or step down. That afternoon, Austin overheard enough to piece it together. He stood frozen outside a conference room, heart pounding as voices drifted through the glass. He's risking everything. Omegas always complicate things. This can't continue. Austin backed away quietly. The guilt hit him hard and fast. That evening, he waited until the floor emptied before knocking on Diego's office door. "Come in," Diego said. Austin closed the door behind him, hands trembling. "I don't want to be the reason you lose your position." Diego looked up sharply. "What did you hear?" "Enough," Austin said softly. "This, whatever this is, it's costing you." Diego stood, crossing the room before stopping himself inches away. "You're not a burden," Diego said fiercely. "Don't ever let them make you believe that." "But I am," Austin whispered. "To the system, to your career." Diego reached out before thinking, cupping Austin's face gently. The touch was brief, reverent, enough to shatter both their restraint. "I won't let you carry that weight," Diego said quietly. "But pretending this doesn't matter is destroying me." Tears welled in Austin's eyes. "Then what do we do?" he asked. Diego exhaled slowly. "We choose," he said, and for the first time, neither of them looked away from the truth. Chapter 8: Stepping away to step forward. The decision didn't come with relief. came with silence. Diego sat alone in his office long after midnight, the city outside reduced to scattered lights and distant movement. The building had emptied hours ago, yet he remained, surrounded by the quiet weight of everything he was about to lose. His resignation letter glowed on the screen. Clear, direct, final. Alpha directors were taught to plan 10 steps ahead, but this choice had stripped away every alternative. There was no path where he kept his authority and protected Austin at the same time. Diego sent the email. The moment it left his outbox, something inside him settled. Not peace, certainty. The next morning, the office buzzed with confusion. Whispers rippled through the executive floor as words spread quickly. An alpha like Diego didn't step down without reason. Speculation ran wild, but Diego ignored it, packing his office with methodical calm. Austin found out through an email notification. His hands shook as he read it. Director Rivera will be resigning effective immediately. The words blurred. He rushed to Diego's office, heart pounding as he knocked once before entering. Diego looked up, eyes calm but tired. "You didn't tell me," Austin said, voice breaking. Diego stood slowly. "I wanted to be certain first." "This is because of me?" Austin whispered. "No," Diego said firmly. "This is because of my choice." He crossed the room, stopping just close enough to feel Austin's warmth. "I couldn't stay in a role that made you unsafe," Diego said. "And I won't regret choosing you." Tears spilled over as Austin laughed softly, overwhelmed. "You're incredible," he said. "And terrifying." Diego smiled faintly. "I've been told that." They stood there, no hierarchy, no rules, just two people finally on equal ground. And for the first time, the future felt possible. Chapter 9, Learning How to Breathe Again. Freedom didn't arrive all at once. It came in fragments. Quiet mornings, unfamiliar routines, and the slow unlearning of fear. Diego no longer woke to alarms set by board meetings and deadlines. Instead, he woke to sunlight spilling through his apartment windows and the steady rhythm of a city that no longer demanded he perform. The absence of authority felt strange at first, like a limb he kept reaching for only to remember it was gone. Austin adjusted differently. Without the rigid structure of work, he found himself unsure where to place his hands, his time, his thoughts. Years of being careful didn't vanish overnight. He still measured his words, still checked suppressant schedules twice, still flinched when footsteps sounded too heavy behind him. Diego noticed everything. They moved slowly, intentionally so. Their first days together weren't filled with dramatic confessions or grand gestures. Instead, there were shared meals eaten in comfortable silence, soft laughter over burnt toast, and long conversations that stretched late into the night. Diego learned that Austin loved quiet music playing in the background while he worked, that he preferred window seats, that he relaxed most when his space was respected rather than filled. Austin learned that Diego's calm came from habit, not coldness, that he carried guilt like armor, that he needed permission, spoken or unspoken, to rest. They talked about the past, about the rules that shaped them, about expectations neither had chosen, about the cost of living inside systems that valued control over connection. Judgment still existed. They felt it in lingering stares on the street, in the careful questions from acquaintances, in the polite distance some alphas maintained when Diego was introduced without his title. But Diego held Austin's hand anyway. Each time Austin tensed, Diego squeezed gently, grounding, reassuring. "You don't have to shrink anymore," Diego said once. Austin believed him slowly. They weren't hiding. They weren't rushing. They weren't binding yet. They were learning how to be together without fear. And for the first time, breathing felt easy. Chapter 10, Against the Scent of the World. The world didn't change just because Diego and Austin did. Rules remained written into law. Hierarchies still shaped workplaces and social spaces. Alphas were still expected to lead, and Omegas were still expected to follow quietly. But within the space Diego and Austin created together, those expectations no longer held power. The conversation about bonding came slowly. Neither of them rushed it. A bond wasn't just instinct. It was promise, permanence, and vulnerability all woven together. It meant choosing each other not just in moments of comfort, but in moments of doubt, fear, and consequence. They talked late into the night, sitting on the floor of Diego's apartment, backs against the couch. "What if people treat us differently?" Austin asked quietly. "They already do," Diego replied gently. "The difference is whether we let that define us." Austin nodded, fingers tightening around his sleeve. "And if one day you regret giving up everything?" Diego turned toward him fully. "I didn't give up everything," he said. "I chose something real." The bond happened on a quiet morning. No ceremony, no audience, just trust. Diego's touch was careful, reverent. Austin's consent was clear and steady. When the mark settled, it felt less like claiming and more like coming home. The connection was warm and grounding, their sense blending naturally, not overpowering, not consuming, balanced. Austin rested his forehead against Diego's shoulder, eyes closed. "This doesn't feel forbidden." Diego smiled, pressing a kiss to Austin's hair. "That's because it never should have been." Life continued. Diego found work that valued his principles more than his title. Austin grew more confident, voice stronger with each step taken beside someone who never asked him to shrink. They faced judgment, they faced doubt, but they faced it together. When Austin asked one evening, "Do you think we'll ever stop being questioned?" Diego answered honestly, "Probably not." Austin smiled anyway. "Then let's keep choosing each other. Against the world, against the rules, against the scent of fear." They existed not as Alpha and Omega bound by hierarchy, but as two people who refused to let love be forbidden. And that choice, made every day, was their quiet revolution.